Okay, so now we start the first part of Dr. Frankenstein's story. Think of it as the backstory um, of a hero or anti-hero. So in our frame story, we start with the opening letters from Robert Walton to his sister, and then we move into the story of Frankenstein, his background. My name is Victor Frankenstein. My parents were from Geneva and were very well respected there. After they married, they traveled to Italy, Germany, and Naples. I was born in Naples. For several years, I was their only child. They loved me deeply. When I was about 5 years old, my mother adopted a little girl. She was the daughter of a nobleman who had died. Elizabeth Lavenza became more than a sister to me. We did everything together. I loved her very much. We were brought up together. There was less than a year between our ages. When my parents had another son, we went back to Geneva and settled there. In Geneva, I became close friends with Henry Clerval. He loved reading and writing stories. Elizabeth was kind and loving. She showed Clerval the beauty of goodness. I read with great pleasure the works of men who had studied nature and discovered its secrets. I became their follower. I didn't want money, but I wanted the glory of a great discovery. I wanted to free people from disease. When I was 15, I witnessed a terrible storm. The thunder was frighteningly loud. As I watched the storm, a stream of fire suddenly came out of an old tree near our house. When the fire died out, most of the tree had disappeared. The next morning, we found the bottom of the tree had become broken into long, thin pieces. I became interested in electricity and I began to study mathematics and other sciences. But destiny was too powerful. She had already decided on my destruction. When I was 17, my parents decided to send me to Ingolstadt University. Then Elizabeth became very sick. My mother took care of her, and Elizabeth recovered. However, then my mother became sick. My children, I always wanted you to marry each other. Elizabeth, my love, you must be a mother to my younger children. I'm sad that I will leave you, but I will try to accept death cheerfully. I hope to see you in another world. She died calmly. My mother was dead, but we still had duty to perform. Elizabeth hid her sorrow and tried to comfort us all. Finally, the day came when I had to go to Ingolstadt. Write often, Victor. I loved my brothers, Elizabeth and Clerval, but I longed to acquire knowledge. Please keep in mind that at this point, Hen, Dr. Victor Frankenstein and Elizabeth are now engaged, and he's off to college. After a long, tiring journey, I arrived at Ingolstadt. The next morning, I delivered my letters of introduction. Monsieur Krempe, professor of natural science. I respected him, although I disliked him immediately. Have you really spent your time studying this nonsense? Yes. What a waste of time. You must begin your studies again. I went into the lecture hall of Monsieur Waldman. He was very different. The ancient teachers promised much but produced nothing. The modern masters promise very little but show us much about nature. They have new powers over heaven and earth. Soon I only wanted to explore unknown powers and discover the deepest mysteries of creation. I found a true friend in Monsieur Waldman. He smoothed the path of knowledge for me in 1,000 ways. In the next 2 years, my discoveries made me well respected at the university. I was especially interested in anything that lived. I wanted to know where life came from. To examine the causes of life, we must first examine death. I wanted to see what happens to the body after death. To me, a graveyard was just a place that was full of dead bodies. I wasn't afraid of it. For days and nights, I examined dead bodies and how they decayed. Then suddenly, after weeks of extremely hard work, I succeeded in discovering the cause of life. For a long time, I wasn't sure how to use this astonishing power. I was able to create life, but to make a body remained extremely difficult. The smallness of many parts of the body made my work very slow, so I decided to make the body larger than normal, about 8 feet tall. Making this body was all I could think about. Alone in my room, I worked on my creation. Often I hated what I was doing. I worked so hard that I became sick and very nervous. I couldn't speak to anyone. On a dark evening in November, I finally finished. I prepared to put life into the lifeless thing. He was perfect. Great God! He opened a dull yellow eye. Then he began to breathe and move. I had worked hard for this moment for 2 years, but now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream disappeared, and I was filled with horror. Here he is seen shrinking away in terror from his creation. I couldn't bear to look at him. I ran out of the room. I couldn't forget the monster, and I had the wildest dreams. I dreamed about Elizabeth. She was walking in Ingolstadt. Remember, she's engaged to him. They're engaged. Pleased and surprised, I embraced her, but as I kissed her lips, they turned deathly white, and she became my dead mother. I woke up in horror, and I saw the monster that I had created trying to speak. Perhaps he spoke, but I didn't hear. One hand reached out to stop me, but I escaped, and I ran into the courtyard. I stayed there all night. All the time I was listening for the sound of the monster. His ugliness was incredible. What I had dreamed of had become my hell. When morning came, I wanted to avoid the monster. I did not dare return to my apartment, so I walked around town. I didn't know where I was or what I was doing. My heart beat hard with fear. My dear Frankenstein, I'm so pleased to see you. I took his hand and quickly forgot my horror. Henry Clerval. My father has finally allowed me to attend university. I'm so happy to see you. But tell me, how are my father, brothers, and Elizabeth? Very well and very happy, but they are a little uneasy that they hear from you so rarely. Keep in mind that Dr. Frankenstein has not been home in 2 years. Henry asks, you look very thin and pale. Have you not slept for several nights? No, I've been working so hard on something that I haven't rested properly, but I hope that's finished now. I was shaking nervously as we walked to my college. I thought the creature could still be in my apartment. I was afraid to see him, but even more afraid that Henry would see him. Henry, wait here for a few minutes. I felt cold with fear, but I saw that my enemy had gone. I clapped my hands for joy and ran down for Henry. The servant brought us breakfast, but I was too excited to eat. Victor, what's the matter? What's making you like this? I thought I had seen the monster in my room. He can tell you. So now he's seeing things. Oh, save me, save me. I fell down in a fit and didn't recover for a long, long time. Henry took care of me for several months. He didn't tell my family about my illness. Very slowly I recovered. Spring arrived, and this helped me. Dearest Henry, how good you've been to me. When you've taken care of me all winter instead of studying, how will I ever repay you? You'll repay me if you get well as fast as you can. And because you seem much better, could you write to your father and Elizabeth? They're worried by your long absence and silence. Yes, I've been thinking about them. Then you'll be pleased to see this letter. It's been here for some days. It's from Elizabeth, I think. Dear Victor, you have been sick, very sick, and I am worried about you. Get well and come home. Your father really wants to see you. Ernest is 16 now. He wants very much to go abroad, but we can't let him leave until you come home. And little William is lovely. He is very tall for his age and smiles and laughs a lot. He already has two little wives. Louisa is his favorite. She's 5. Do you remember our servant, Justine Moritz? Her mother treated her badly, so she came to us when she was 12. You liked her very much. She could always make you feel happy. One by one, her brothers and sisters died, and her mother called her home. Sometimes her mother was sorry for what she had done. At other times, she said that Justine had caused the deaths of her brothers and sister. But now her mother is at peace. She died at the beginning of last winter. Justine has come back to us, and I love her dearly. She is clever, gentle, and very pretty. I feel better now because I have written to you, dear Victor. Goodbye, and please write to me, Elizabeth Lavenza. Dear, dear Elizabeth, I will write immediately. I wrote and felt very tired, but it was the start of my recovery. 2 weeks later, I was well enough to leave my room. I hated natural science, and the sight of my scientific equipment, I could never tell Henry what I had done or what had happened that terrible night. Henry had come to the university to study the languages of the East, and I began to study them with him. I found comfort in the writings of the Eastern poets. They wrote about a warm sun and gardens, an enemy behaves well, and the fire that burns in your own heart. Summer passed and winter came. I wanted to go back to Geneva, but there was too much snow. Spring came back again. Henry suggested that we go walking around Ingolstadt before we return to Geneva. What an excellent friend. For 2 weeks we walked in the countryside. Henry taught me to love nature again and the happy faces of children. I felt very happy and had no worries at all. When I returned to Ingolstadt, I found this letter from my father. Dear Victor, you have probably waited for a letter so that you can arrange the date of your return. So how can I tell you about what has happened to us? William is dead. That sweet child who was so gentle. Victor, someone has murdered him. Last Thursday, we all went for a walk in the Plain Palais. It was a beautiful, warm evening, and we went further than normal. Ernest, William, it was getting dark when we decided to turn back. William and Ernest had gone ahead of us, so we called for them. Have you seen William? We were playing and he ran away to hide. I tried to find him, and waited for him, but he hasn't come back. We searched for him all night. I couldn't rest while he was lost. It was about 5 in the morning. I discovered my lovely boy, pale and still. The marks of the murderer's fingers were on his neck. Oh God, I've murdered him. This is Elizabeth speaking. I let him wear a valuable picture of your mother around his neck. It's gone. It must be the reason someone killed him. We are doing everything we can to find the murderer, but that won't bring back my dearest William. Come home, dearest. Victor only can comfort. Come home, dearest Victor. Only you can comfort Elizabeth. She cries all the time and blames herself for William's death. Will you return and comfort us all? Your loving father, Alphonse Frankenstein. William says to him, My dear Frankenstein, this is terrible news. What are you going to do? I'm going to visit Geneva immediately. I said goodbye to my friend. As I got closer to home, I felt terribly sad and afraid. So here you can see a broader picture of what's going on these pages. Although it was dark when I arrived in Geneva, I was unable to rest. I decided to visit the place where poor William had died. I crossed the lake by boat to arrive at Plain Palais. Lightning played on the mountains, and thunder crashed above me. He shouts into the heavens, William, this is the song of your funeral. As I said these words, I saw a figure in the darkness. A flash of lightning showed me who it was, the devil that I had created. What was he doing there? Could he be the murderer of my brother? I became sure that he was. He was the murderer. When I saw him again, he was among the rocks near the top of the mountain. He soon reached the top and disappeared. It was about 5 in the morning when I arrived at my father's house. I told the servants not to wake the family, and I went into the library. 6 years had passed since I left, and it's been 4 years since he made the monster, and the monster's been living on its own. My dearest Victor, Ernest! Ah, this is such a sad time, but I'm sure you will be able to help our father and Elizabeth. Elizabeth? She needs comfort the most. She blames herself for William's murder, but now we have found the murderer. You found him? It's impossible to. How? I saw him last night and he was free. I don't know what you mean. We have discovered that the murderer is Justine Moritz. Poor, poor girl. Surely no one believes she did it. No one did at first, but she has behaved very strangely recently. She is appearing in court today, so you will hear everything then. Justine became sick on the morning of the murder. She stayed in her bed for several days. During this time, one of the servants found the picture of our mother that William had been wearing in her pocket. When she was arrested, she behaved very strangely. You are all wrong. I know the murderer, and it is not Justine. Papa, Victor says he knows the murderer. He says Justine is innocent. If she is, I hope the court does not decide she is guilty. Elizabeth says to him, Your arrival, Victor, fills me with hope. I will never be happy again if Justine dies. She is innocent. Don't be afraid. We spent a few sad hours together until we went to the trial. When Justine came into the court, she looked calm and confident. She looked at us lovingly. Justine had been out on the night of the murder. Early the next morning, a woman who works at the market saw her near the place where Bill William's body was found. I asked her what she was doing. She gave me a confused answer. Justine was called to defend herself. God knows that I am completely innocent. I spent the evening at my aunt's house. On my way home, a man asked me if I had seen the child who was lost. I spent many hours looking for him. When I tried to return to Geneva, the gates were shut and I had to spend the night in a barn. This is the picture that the servant found in Justine's pocket. Elizabeth had placed it around William's neck before he disappeared. A sound of horror filled and anger filled the court. In the early morning, the sound of footsteps woke me. I decided to look for the missing child again. I was very tired when I met the market woman because I hadn't slept much. I don't know how the picture got into my pocket. I can't explain it. The court must decide what happens to me. Although Elizabeth and others spoke well of Justine, people in the court were angry with her. The next morning I went to the court. They decided Justine was guilty. But she has confessed. How will I ever believe again in human goodness? Although I will see her, although she is guilty, and you must come with me, Victor. Oh, Justine, I thought you were innocent. I confess, but I lied. I am innocent. Oh, Justine, forgive me for not trusting you. Do not fear. I'll prove you're innocent. You will not die. I'm not afraid to die. I can die in peace now that you and your family know I'm innocent. The poor sufferer tried to comfort us all, but I, the true murderer, could not feel comforted. The next morning, Justine died. Those I loved cried over the graves of William and Justine, the first victims of my creation. I had wanted to help other people, but now everything was ruined. Full of guilt, I needed to be alone. I had caused some terrible evils, and I was very afraid that the monster would do something else. My father's health was shaken, and Elizabeth was very sad. I felt deeply troubled. One day I decided to leave. I went to the Alpine valleys because I thought I could forget my sorrows there. After a time, I arrived at the village of Chamonix. I decided to climb to the top of Montonvert. I remembered the view from the top. It had had a great effect on me when I first saw it. The climb was dangerous. The tops of the mountains were hidden in the clouds, and rain fell heavily from the dark sky. It was nearly noon when I arrived at the top of the mountain. I sat on a rock and looked at the wonderful view. My heart filled with joy. Allow me this happiness, or take me away from the joys of life. As I said this, I suddenly saw the figure of a huge man. He was coming toward me at great speed. It was the monster that I had created. I shook with anger and horror. I wanted to fight and kill him. Devil, aren't you afraid of me? Go away, disgusting creature, or stay and I will kill you. Monster replies, I expected this. All men hate the poor and unhappy. And you, my maker, you too hate me and want to kill me. Do your duty toward me, and I'll leave you and everyone else in peace. But if you refuse, I'll murder all your friends. You monster, devil, I'll finish the life I so stupidly gave you. Be calm and listen to me. Haven't I suffered enough? Life is dear to me, and I will defend it. Remember that you made me more powerful than yourself. However, I will not fight you. I am your creature. I was good, but unhappiness has made me bad. Make me happy, and I will be good again. Go away. We can't be friends. We are enemies. Go or fight. How can I make you understand? You hate me, and so does everyone else. My enemies will share my unhappiness if you do nothing. Listen to me, Frankenstein, and then, if you can and still want to, destroy the work of your hands. I hate these hands that made you. Come to the hut on the mountain. Listen to me. Decide if I will lead a good life or bring death to you and your friends. I decided to listen to his story. For the first time, I realized that as his creator, I had duties toward him. I felt I ought to make him happy.